we're going to officially get started. I want to thank you all for attending our quarterly Breaking into virtual cybersecurity meetup with the DC cybersecurity professionals. We have an excellent presenter here tonight. I was always a fan, but I became a bigger fan ever since we were able to do a virtual panel together. And I saw how much you loved what you do. And, that made me, like you even more, as if that was possible. But we have Alyssa Miller tonight, who's gonna provide the From Barista to Security Pro talk. I already know that you're gonna love it. At any time, if you have any questions or comments, please put them in the questions panel and we'll get it started. So without further ado, Alyssa, there you go.
Awesome.
Welcome.
Cool. Thank you, Ty. I appreciate it. And I appreciate everybody who's here. Good to see. I'm actually, wow, I'm kind of dumbfounded too, just looking at that list of locations that people are from. So, as Ty mentioned, yeah, my name's Alyssa Miller. And I realize probably not everybody knows me. In fact, I would say probably more people in this world don't know me than do. Yeah, that's probably reality for everybody. So let me introduce myself a little bit. First of all, I'm a hacker and a researcher. And when I say that, I mean, I've been hacking computers since I was a kid. At the age of 12, I bought my first computer. I actually went out, got a paper route, saved up a bunch of money, and went down to Best Buy and bought a computer. And I mean, we're talking, this was before most people, computers in the home were not ubiquitous like they are today. I mean, very few people had their own computers at home. But I bought myself a computer, taught myself basic programming, then I got into asynchronous modem communications and serial comms and things like that, and had a lot of fun with an older online service called Prodigy that some of you, if you're as old as me, might remember. But yeah, so that's kind of where I began, and I've been working in security. I actually started off as a developer and got into security later. I'm also a security advocate. And that kind of holds two meanings for me now. Just in my own course of being a part of the security industry, I like to advocate for security practices. It's why I get out and speak at various conferences around the globe, really trying to advocate for all sorts of different cybersecurity concepts and topics and things, and just trying to share information and my ideas, hear others' ideas, share research that I'm doing, hear about the research others are doing. Security advocate now, because of a job that I picked up at the beginning of this year, has a new meaning for me as well. I'm actually a application security advocate for a company called Sneak. So now I am literally getting paid to go out and do all those things like research and speaking and writing blogs and other things. I've been in security for about 15 years. So like I said, developer first, then I moved over to security. The last 12 years have really been as a security leader. And that's in a couple different spaces. I ran the security team and vulnerability management program for a Fortune 200 financial services company. Then I got into consulting and ran a number of teams. And the reason I bring this up is in each of those cases, I obviously had to hire people. In many of those cases, a couple teams in particular, I had to build teams from the ground up. So I've had a lot of experience in how we recruit for people, how to bring people into cybersecurity, how to have them join different teams, what types of skill sets and things I look for, etc. And then finally, I am the co-host of a podcast called The Uncommon Journey. I co-host that with Philip Wiley, who, as you heard Ty mention, will be speaking to your group in a couple weeks or so. And Chloe Mastagi is also a co-host with us. And we talk to a lot of different people just about their stories, about how they got into cybersecurity. In fact, we had Ty on our show a few weeks ago. So that's all about me. But I didn't come here to talk about me. I came here to talk about you. I came here to talk about this thing we call, or you've heard called, the cybersecurity skills gap. And I want to begin with just a story. So I remember going back a long time ago, I was talking with a colleague of mine who is another hiring manager. And I mean, the skills gap thing isn't a new concept. We've been struggling for years to bring people into the security space and to find talented people and things of that nature. And he and I were talking, and he was struggling with trying to find talent. And I started asking him about the people he was interviewing and what types of skills he was looking for. And he was telling me about all these technologies he wanted people to understand. And I got to thinking, and I told him, so I don't think you're looking for the right kinds of skills. And I said, so tell me about some of the people that you rejected. And one of the people he brought up was he got a resume from somebody who was working as a barista. They had no experience in cybersecurity jobs. They had no experience in technology jobs. They were a barista, but they had done some research on their own or whatever. But he was really, really frustrated that this person had even dared apply for this position. And I stopped him. I said, what kind of position is it? Oh, it's a SOC analyst. So I proceeded to explain to him and describe to him how the skills of a cybersecurity SOC analyst actually equate to a lot of the same skills that you'll find in a barista. And by the end of it, he was wowed, and he kind of even admitted to me he thought he made a mistake. So I'm going to use this metaphor throughout. We're going to come back to this later, and I'm going to explain to you after I've gone through and kind of discussed with you some ideas about how we get there. I'm going to share with you the same pointers that I told him. But let's start with this whole idea of the cybersecurity skills gap. We hear a lot of news about it. We see some of the headlines right here. People talking about there's going to be 4 million jobs left open at the end of 2020, and we've got this great talent shortage. But then on the other side of things, I was hearing all these stories from people who were struggling to find jobs in security. And it wasn't just entry level people, it was experienced people who were trying to find new roles. People were having a lot of trouble. And so I started to wonder, is this cybersecurity skills gap really exist? Is this even really a thing? And so at the beginning of this year, I did some research. I did some of this research. Honestly, it was actually for a book that I'm in the middle of writing, but I wanted to understand what was going on, because it doesn't make sense to me. How do we have millions of jobs open, but millions of people looking who can't find jobs? So I kicked off a couple surveys, 2 of them, in fact, one that was aimed at people who had never worked in cybersecurity before, and the other aimed at people who had existing careers. And within that subset, of course, some of them were actively looking for jobs, some were not. And I gathered a lot of information, but one of the things I gathered was information on if they were looking for a job, how long they had been looking. And this is where things get surprising when we talk about an industry that's complaining that we don't have enough talented people to hire into these 4 million open security roles. So let's start with those entry-level job seekers. When an entry-level job seeker who's never worked in security before, but maybe has a degree, maybe has other technology experience, maybe has a certification, or maybe doesn't have any of those things related to security whatsoever, when they enter the job market, as you can see here, the vast majority of them spend 3 months or longer looking for a job. What's a little alarming here is that 32%, more than 32%, are looking for a job for 7 months or longer, sometimes over a year. Well, now wait a minute, you're telling me we have these millions and millions and millions of open jobs. How is this possible? How can we have all these people that are looking for jobs and can't find them if there's so many open jobs that are just dying to find people to hire? But I look at this and you say, well, come on, Alyssa, we know a lot of people are trying to hire more experienced people. It's hard to break in if you're entry level, but if you've got experience, surely those jobs are easier to land. Well, on that experience survey, it didn't get a lot better. It got a little bit better. I mean, you do see that 0 to 2 months percentage jumps up quite a bit to 46.5. But you still see here the majority of people look for 3 months or longer. And you can see even among experienced people, almost 1 in 4 is searching for 7 months or longer, with 16% of those being on the market for over a year. 4 million open jobs. But this is what we're up against. So this starts to tell me right away, something else is going on here. We're not finding these people. Why aren't we able to connect these people who are searching for these jobs with all of these open positions? Something doesn't make sense. So I asked some other questions on the survey. One of the things I asked on the experienced professional survey was, are you a hiring manager? And if they answered yes, of which about 40% of them stated they were hiring managers, I then asked them, okay, what is the biggest challenge you have when you look for cybersecurity candidates? And you see the top 7 responses here. Want to guess what the highest or most common response was? Wasn't unrealistic candidates' expectations. It was that they felt they were getting underqualified applicants. Okay, so this is interesting because we see that even experienced people are struggling to find these roles. Now we also see 21% said they struggle in writing job descriptions. Some say, 18% get a lack of applicants. We'll talk a little bit later about how those two, job descriptions and lack of applicants, go together, because that's a big struggle for a lot of us. And we'll see more about how that plays into our shortage in just a little bit. But so this is interesting, underqualified applicants. Okay, so people are applying to your jobs, but you don't feel they have the right qualifications to fit. That gives me something to go on. But I wanted the other side of this story. So I also asked those who were aspiring professionals what struggles they were having. So when I mention these job descriptions, let's talk about these for a minute. I've been doing a lot of research into job descriptions as well. I hear a lot of complaints about job descriptions, and I've seen some pretty awful ones myself. So some of you might have seen this before. This is a job description for an information security internship. Okay, the very first thing you see is a bachelor's degree in information technology. Okay, that makes sense. Interns, a lot of times you're looking for a college graduate. Usually you try to get interns that are still in school, but all right, we'll let this go. The next circled area there really is mind-boggling. A CISSP, a CISA, or a CISM. Each one of those requires a certain level of job experience. So you're talking about an intern here, and you're expecting them to have, in the case of a CISSP, 5 years of experience? Come on. And then we look at the next one, minimum 7+ years working in information technology security. Now, wait a minute. We're talking about an internship, and you're expecting them to already have experience in the job field that they're going to intern with. This is bizarre, but we see these all the time. Check out this one. This is one of my favorites because it is so awful. Now you see I've gone ahead and I've redacted it to protect the guilty, because I don't want to shame organizations, because many organizations are struggling with it. But this organization in particular is infamous for being one of the worst. Here's a role for an information security architect. So this is one of those that it's not an entry-level role by any means. An architect role is a pretty lofty role, and so you're expecting somebody with a lot of experience. So you see they kind of describe what, they're one of the best employers, and they're great and wonderful, and they tell you all about the company, and then they say, here's your role. And they start to describe your role. And they continue to describe the role. And they continue to describe the role, and then they add in all of the requirements. 3 pages worth of job description here. at that laundry list of requirements. You wonder why your applicants come to you and they're not qualified? Look at what you expect of them. I mean, you're expecting this architect to know everything from Azure and Active Directory to ISO 27001 to direct hands-on experience with vulnerability management tools. I mean, holy cow, you want them to know asset management, problem management, regulations across multiple fields from PCI to HIPAA and high-tech. HIPAA and high-tech, that doesn't even make sense in this case, because let me tell you, by the way, this is a grocery store chain that is looking for this. Why do they need HIPAA and high-tech? This is bizarre. Look at everything they're going to expect this person to do. Are you going to apply for this job? I'm not. That's crazy. So when I asked people, what are the problems that you have with trying to find a new role? Here's your top 7 responses. Anybody want to guess what the #1 response is? Yeah, it's that one at the bottom. Bad job descriptions far and away are the biggest struggle. And this is the problem. Our expectations as hiring organizations for people are impossibly high. Organizations are looking for those unicorns, and the simple fact of the matter is many of them aren't finding them because they're focused on all the wrong things. Now, I'm here today to talk to you about how to start your career in cybersecurity. I'm not here to complain and moan and groan about, what organizations are doing that are wrong. I bring this up because I want you to be aware, because if you're out there looking for a job or you're looking for a new job, I know that you're dealing with exactly these struggles. So I want to talk to you today about how you can start to overcome these. I have a completely set of different talks that I'm doing trying to address the problem with employers. In fact, I've got a TEDx talk coming up in February where I'm going to talk about that. So today, though, this is about helping job seekers, people who are looking for jobs. How do you overcome this struggle when employers out there are making it as absolutely difficult as they possibly could to find a job? So let's get in. Let's dig into this, and let's start with really understanding what the typical hiring process looks like. Because one of the things I found, now I mentioned I did these surveys. I mentioned I did this job description research. The other thing I did was I did a lot of interviews with people in the cybersecurity space. And what I found is a lot of people don't even understand how the hiring process works. In most organizations, what you see here in this graphic from JobScan is what the job hiring process looks like. It starts with someone creates a job. So that means the hiring manager and HR get together and they do whatever they need to do to create this job. They probably have to get some sort of requisition approved through management and get the funds and everything all set and approved. Well, then that hiring manager works with HR and they create a job description, and that job description gets published to their company website most likely, and probably to some job boards as well. And then job seekers start to apply. And when job seekers apply, many times they're entering their information into what we call an applicant tracking system, or an ATS. This is that automated system that oftentimes takes your resume, it parses it out, it fills all that information in, and it puts all your work experience in there and everything else, and usually you end up having to edit it all over anyway, because a lot of them aren't very good at reading resumes. But you put all that in there. Then applicants get screened. Now that screening process is really interesting, and we're going to come back to that in a minute. But they screen out applicants, they pick kind of their top group. That group gets handed to the hiring manager. The hiring manager is going to select and say, yeah, I would like to look at these. And then they start conducting interviews. After a bunch of interviews, the hiring manager selects a person. They maybe work with other people in the organization to pick who they want, make an offer. Ultimately, someone gets hired. But what I want to focus on is that screening process for a minute. So let's talk about what happens when applicants get screened and how they get screened. The first step of that is the ATS. If you didn't already know this, know it now and remember this. That system that's taking your resume and is parsing it out, it's scoring you. It is looking at everything that's in your resume and it's comparing it to the job description, and it is producing a score of how likely it feels you are to meet the requirements of the job. Now, like so many pieces of enterprise software, this is one of those things that can be customized by every organization. For some, that scoring is very simple. It's just based on simple yes, no questions like, are you available to work in the United States? Or, are you, do you have this cert, or whatever have you. For some of them, it gets pretty complex, the amount of data that it's looking at on your resume. But the thing that remains constant is they get a ranked list. So if you have 100 people apply for a job, that ATS is going to rank those 100 people, and it's going to give them a score. Usually the score is 0 to 100. So think about this now, because you've got 100 resumes. They're all scored as far as who meets the job role best. The next step in the screening process is the recruiter or the HR person. And the first thing they're going to do is they're going to look at those 100 resumes that came in. They're not going to look through all 100. They're going to pick the ones that scored the best in the ATS, and those are the ones they're going to start looking at first. And their goal there is to take those, and they want to find, okay, of those that scored the highest, which ones look the best, that now we'll schedule that initial HR screen. So this is usually that first call you get. It's almost always done by phone, even when we're not in lockdown. It's usually maybe a half hour long, and you meet with the HR person. They ask you a bunch of really simple questions. So just getting to this point requires you to get past the ATS and get that score high in the ATS. Then you meet with the recruiter and the HR. Now you're starting to get some human interaction. And then finally, once the HR person or the recruiters talk to you, now they make some decisions, and they're going to pass on just the best performing people from those screening processes to the hiring manager. So they really act as another filter before things finally get to the hiring manager, and the hiring manager gets to see your cool resume that you put together. So this is the process, and you can see why this is important, because there's a lot of steps that you need to understand, and each step requires its own approach. So we're going to talk about how to game this process, how you hack your career, how you hack this process so you can find that job quicker. But warning, frustration lies ahead, because there are so many efforts that you will find that you need to go through as part of this. And ultimately, what you're trying to overcome are a lot of the shortcomings of those potential employers. So let's dive in. The first thing I'm going to tell you, and this is more in particular for those people who are trying to get into cybersecurity for the first time, those who haven't had a job before, and that is know your interests. Now, this doesn't necessarily not apply to people who have experience. If you've got experience and you're looking to make a pivot or something like that, know what it is that you want from your next role. But I want to share with you some examples of things that I get on a regular basis. And these are examples. I don't mean to shame people. So God, I really hope no one recognizes this as something they sent me. If they do, I apologize. But understand, these are the types of messages I get, and they're not particularly helpful. So this is one that I got a few weeks ago on LinkedIn. And you see this person tells me all about, they're very passionate about a cybersecurity career, and they're looking for some guidance. Can I suggest to them what to do and how? This is so broad. Unfortunately, it leaves me with nothing to go on. Here's another example. I have great interest in cybersecurity, and I want to change my career path to security because I've developed a passion for it. What advice or learning path? Well, again, you haven't really told me anything. And this one is, here's an example of the complete exchange. Here's one, hey, can you give me some pointers in getting into cybersecurity? Sure, tell me a little bit about yourself. What are you interested in? Well, I want to learn about everything cybersecurity. Huh? How am I going to teach you everything there is to know about cybersecurity? I don't know everything there is to know about cybersecurity. So I ask, tell me more. Where are your passions? Oh, it all sounds great. I want to be an expert in everything, and I want to be popular and well known. well, you know what? That's the wrong reason to get into this position in the first place. If you're looking to get into cybersecurity because you want to be some cybersecurity rock star or some little security celebrity or what have you, that's probably not the reason you should be looking to get a career going in this space. I'm sorry. Those are not motivations that are going to bode well for you. So I do my best when I get these messages, but I need you to do more for yourself. So what can you do? Well, first of all, understand this is what cybersecurity looks like. I like this graphic that Henry Yang put together, not because it's accurate. In fact, I disagree with a lot of it. But the complexity that it reflects is 100% accurate. This is how complex cybersecurity is. Think about it. Security these days plays into every little piece of technology you can possibly use. Think about IoT, the Internet of Trash. All the devices we're connecting to the network, all these different technologies, whether it's medical devices, hair curlers, candles, yes, believe it or not, all these things that we're connecting to the internet, all this stuff needs to be secured along with web applications and network devices. Everything that we do in our world needs to be secured in terms of cybersecurity. There's no way you can know it all. And within every one of those technologies, there's so many varying roles, different aspects of how we secure it, how we verify that it's secure, how we govern that security. There's so many areas that you can get into cybersecurity. If you don't know or have some idea at least where you want to go, I'm sorry, that's step number one. You've got to understand that. And so I try to tell people, this is where you need to begin. You're not going to know the answer, right? I mean, I'm not going to say that you're going to sit down and you're going to say, this is where I'm going to go and that's the job I'm going to get, and you're going to be 100% right. You may find you need to pivot later on. But that's the beauty of cybersecurity, is there's lots of ways to pivot. But figure out, you need to do some self-analysis and figure out what it is that you want to do. If you're unsure, here's a pointer I tell people. Pick out 3, 5, maybe even 10 security blogs. Go through the headlines, copy them down. Find maybe 10 to 20 of those headlines and just copy the headlines. You don't need to read the story, just take the headlines. Now look at that list of 10 or 20 headlines and rate those in order of your interest. Which ones sound the most interesting to you? Now look at that list that you've now ranked and break them up into categories that fit the different roles in cybersecurity. Why do they make you, what's interesting about them? Is it because they talk about solving mysteries and doing investigations? Is it because they talk about having to react to incoming threats and battling against adversaries in real time? Is it because they talk about building and designing defenses? What are the things that speak to you? This is what will help you figure out what passions are driving you into a security role or into your new security role. Now you can take those and you can start to equate those into some of the different security roles that you see here. But this is a great way for you to get started and to really understand who you are, what it is that interests you, and where you want to go in your career. Because without that, this is such an expansive industry. There's so many ways you can go that I'm sorry, there's just not good information to give you, advice to share if you're not sure where it is you want to go. So with that in hand, now you can start reaching out and building your network. Social media is a great place. If you're not using Twitter yet, you need to get out there and use Twitter. I'm sorry, you want to get into security. The security community lives on Twitter more than anywhere else. Now, the great thing about Twitter is that you can interact with anybody and everybody. So all those really big names that you hear about in the security space, the Dave Kennedys, the Bruce Schneiers, Ed Scotus, you name it. All these big names we've heard about, Katie Masiris, Alif Dennis, all these names, really, really popular people in the security world. You can go out there and you can interact with them. You can interact with their followers. You can have conversations. You can share ideas. That immediately starts to build relationships with these people. But don't forget about the others too. Use LinkedIn. LinkedIn is a great place for professional networking. Meetup, obviously you're using Meetup, you got here today. Meetup is another great way, looking for different meetups. You're involved in DC cybersecurity professionals, that's great. Find other communities out there, and even Reddit can be helpful. Get in those communities, interact with people, and start making personal connections. The key is you need to be willing to interact. When you see someone's post, make a comment, share your idea, comment on their idea. Don't be afraid to challenge them in a respectful way. That's how you show that you're engaged and you understand and you want to be a part of this community. And those networking connections will not only lead to helping you find mentorship with different people, but a lot of times those are people that can help you find that next role. So if you're not doing that already, it's time to begin. All right, so you know where you want to go. You've kind of built your network. Now let's talk about the ATS for a minute. As I said before, the ATS often struggles in just simply parsing your resume. So we need to understand, how do I go about beating the ATS and get the ATS to score me as high as possible? Well, the first step is simple formatting. Go after that parser and make sure it can read your resume. This means simple formatting, bullet points. Believe it or not, fonts come into play here. Using a simple to read font can make all the difference when it comes to an ATS being able to properly read and recognize keywords in your resume. Stay away from effects. Don't use silly effects. Don't put all sorts of graphics and stuff. In fact, oftentimes what I tell people is have two different resumes. One that's for the ATS that's very easily machine readable, and another that is more human readable. Sometimes you don't get the opportunity to share both. But the machine readable one is the one that you need to be concerned with the ATS. That's the one that needs to be easily parsed and easily processed. The second thing, when it comes to your resume, it needs to be tailored for the job that you're applying to. If you're going out there and you are creating one resume and that's the resume that you send to everybody, you're doing it wrong. When you build your resume, you want to look at that job description. Look at keywords that exist in that job description and try to include those keywords in some way in your resume. I'm not saying lie and say that you have experience in the technology that you don't, or you have skills that you don't have, but look for ways that you can incorporate those keywords and variations on those keywords into your resume before you send it in. Make sure you're checking the boxes. When you look at the job description, look at the things that say requirements first. You'll notice how every job description, or at least most, will have a list of requirements, and then they'll have a list of preferred skills, preferred experience, something like that. Focus on the requirements and then go to the preferred skills. And if you can touch some of those boxes as well, that's great. But tick as many of the boxes as you can. And then finally, to help the ATS out in particular, be sure that your resume is chronological. I know this seems simple and you would expect it, but believe it or not, a lot of times people get resumes in that they go all over the place. They're not really arranged, or they have large gaps in time because they just don't list certain jobs. List your newest job first and go reverse chronologically backward. Make sure you fill in all the required information, even if you have to guess. If they're asking you for start and end dates, include start and end dates. Do your best. Get it as close as you can. If they want the month and day and you barely remember what year it is, take a guess. Do your best. In general, if you're close, they're not going to hold you back. Now, if you tell them you had 5 years experience at a job and they call and verify it and you only had 2, that might be an issue. But in general, most of us should be able to fairly easily construct our past. Heck, most of us, it's all on LinkedIn now anyway, right? So make sure you tick all of those boxes too. Get as much of the required information as you can in there, because the more fields you leave blank, the lower you're going to get scored by the ATS. So make sure that you've added that in and that you're checking all of those boxes, because that is what's going to help you. The more boxes you check for the ATS, the better you're going to do. So focus on that. That's important. Now let's talk about checking those boxes for a minute, because one of those boxes is certifications, right? And this is the landscape of security certifications. And this isn't even the full landscape. This effort that someone's been putting together is great. I told you I did some research on cybersecurity job descriptions. 91% of them ask for a certification of some perspective. Of those, 56% say CISSP or equivalent. Obviously, if you're entry level, you're probably not going to have a CISSP. You need 5 years of experience to get one. So what do you do instead? I recommend people look at general security certs first. Unless you're absolutely sure that you want to go after a pen testing role, don't go get a CEH. Don't go after a G-Pen or some expensive SANS certification. Look at the ones that are affordable and attainable. Security Plus by far is where I think most people should start. It's a broad certification. You can see here at the very bottom, it spans a number of different domains. The price tag is very attainable, and it demonstrates that you have a certification. So even if the job says CISSP, if you feel you're otherwise qualified for that job, but you only have a Security Plus, go ahead and apply anyway. It's worth it. Do it. This is important that you understand, because all too often we see people out chasing certs and they come with a bunch of alphabet soup and certs and they spend all this money getting certifications and it doesn't really help. In fact, in my survey, what I discovered was that there is no correlation between the time spent searching for a job and having a certification. The only thing the certification does for you is it checks that box. So be aware of that. Don't overspend on these things. Get what you need to in order to get into that job, and then make your employer pay for you to get more certifications, if that's the route you even want to go. So, all right, we've checked all the boxes. We got past the ATS. Now it's time to talk to the recruiter. How do you inspire the recruiter to pick your resume out of the list and to forward you on to the hiring manager? First and foremost, be memorable. What can you do to make yourself memorable for that HR person? This is where I tell people, focus on things like videos and blogs. Now, you've probably heard people tell you a million times, if you're entry level, hey, you know what? Go do Hack the Box or go do CTFs, go do all these things, and then you get to filling out your resume and you realize there's really no way that you can credibly put that stuff on your resume. No one pays attention to it. Well, what I tell people is, as you're doing those things, if you have a home lab, write a blog about it. Keep a diary in your blog of all the stuff you're doing on your home lab, someplace that now you can put that link in your resume and that HR person or that hiring manager can go out and look at it. My favorite story for being memorable, I ended up hiring this person. I had interviewed her and I liked her, and I passed her on to a group interview with a few of the people on my team. And they did the interview, and after her interview, within an hour, I got an email from her that she had also sent to the 3 people who she had interviewed with in this group interview, expressing that she didn't like the answer she gave to one of their questions, and that she created a video in which she described the concept. And she built this video in a way that it was designed to teach anybody who wanted to understand what malware was. She described it and described countermeasures for it. It was a great instructional video that she sent us because she didn't like her answer. And it was a video that she created after she decided she didn't like her answer and she wanted to do better. That was memorable. The other thing I will tell you about being memorable is this phrase that a colleague of mine uses, what's your weird? Figure out what that thing is about you that makes you unique. It doesn't have to be related to a skill that you have in cybersecurity or anything else. What's something about you that stands out? Use that and highlight that in the introduction of your resume. Use it in your cover letter. Put it out there, focus on it, make it the theme for your resume so that people understand there's this unique thing about who you are. For me, it was embracing the term hacker. As I'm looking at leadership roles, a lot of times, I started to think like, I can't call myself a hacker. People aren't going to like that for a leadership role. And the reality was I found out when I started to actually embrace that and made that my weird, it worked. People really liked that. I owned that, but I still had that skill set of leadership. Make sure you link those things then back to the requirements. Tailor your resume, tailor your conversation with that recruiter so that everything ties back to those requirements. How can those videos or those blogs that you've produced tie into the requirements for that job? Make those connections, draw that map for the HR person as you're having that conversation. Draw those lines in your resume, in your cover letter. And then finally, I can't believe that this has to be said, but be responsive. As I interview different recruiters for my research, this was the #1 thing they told me they had problems with were people who simply wouldn't respond or would take weeks to respond to an email from the recruiter. That's an easy way to make sure that that recruiter moves on to somebody else and they forget about who you are. All right, so you've won them over. Now, how do you win with the hiring manager? One of the most frustrating things I hear when I ask people, what's one piece of advice that you would give someone trying to get into cybersecurity? It is have passion. They all say that, have passion. But what does that mean? Hopefully, I've already given you some concrete steps to get you further along. But now that you're at the point where you're talking to the hiring manager, now's when it's crucial that your passion comes through. It needs to come through in your energy and in all the things that you do. These are some of the quotes that I got from hiring managers on their advice. You can see how often passion is brought up. Genuine passion for the field trumps dry experience. Be passionate. Make sure you are passionate about it and have an aptitude for it and a hunger to learn and share knowledge. Find problems that you want to solve. Understand the value of the solutions. Be passionate about solving them. This is where those videos and those blogs come into play. If you can sit there and you can show this type of thing, hey, look, I saw this problem and I wrote code to fix it, or I did this thing on my home network to solve this issue and I created this video blog about it. Those are things that show your passion not only to the HR person, but to the hiring manager. And let that come through. Share those experiences when you get that opportunity to talk to the hiring manager, when you get to talk to the other people that you're going to interview with. Let them see that in every moment. You're on the stage at that point. This is your time to shine. Make sure that you've done the work, that now you can draw upon that and really show how much interest you have in being a part of this field. And then sell yourself. Jake Williams was another guest that we had on our Uncommon Journey podcast, and he said something that he put this process out there, and I asked him if I could quote it because I love this process. This is how he talks about selling yourself. He said what he does is he has people prepare their resume, but then he has them come to him, hand him their resume, and now, without using a resume at all, provide a 1 to 2 minute elevator pitch. Spend 1 to 2 minutes describing to that person what it is, why it is they should hire you, what value you're going to bring to their organization. And then go and locate everything from your elevator pitch on your resume. If there are things that you had in your elevator pitch that don't show up on your resume, it's time to revise your resume and make sure you add those in there. This is a great way to really strengthen your resume and make sure that you're selling yourself to that job. Now make sure again that you're doing this for each job. Your resume needs to be tailored each time. So think about it in these terms. What is your elevator pitch? You can sit down, you can write it out if you want, or just think about it for a few minutes. What are the key aspects? What are the things about you that bring value to that organization? What are the reasons they should hire you instead of the next person down the line? Then finally, let's talk about that barista. I said we were going to circle back. And I want to start with the difference between knowledge, skills, and experience. There are 3 levels of qualification that you can have for any job, 3 levels of what I call capability. The first is knowledge. Knowledge just means maybe you had some training, maybe it's something you read about, you've researched it, or you studied it. Okay, that means you have knowledge of that subject. A skill is you've worked on it. You've actually applied that knowledge in some way. Maybe you did a CTF, maybe you went to a hacking village or something like that at one of the conferences. Maybe you did some hands-on training in a lab environment. Maybe you had your home lab, whatever. You got to apply those. That became skill now. Experience is taking that one step further. Experience is having that demonstrated capability that you've done in a job setting somewhere. You've actually used it in a real life scenario. You've gone beyond the lab environment, you've gone beyond practice, and you've actually in a real life business scenario had to apply it. Now that comes from work experience, but it could also be that, hey, your friend owns a business and you help them configure their firewall, or you help them pen test a web application, or you help them write some code to address a security issue. Maybe you help them implement and secure their S3 environment in AWS. Whatever it is, those are ways that you can demonstrate experience. And indeed, at minimum, if you can demonstrate knowledge, demonstrate knowledge. If you have ways to show skill, that's even better. Experience is the best. So think about each requirement in that job description and try to put it into one of these categories. And then finally, if you're struggling, let's turn back to the barista example. This is what I walked my friend through when I talked about how do I take skills that in no way appear to apply to cybersecurity. There's skills that I learned, but they weren't in a cybersecurity role. How do I bring them into cybersecurity? Well, let's talk about that barista. What does a barista do? Well, at the base level, you might put on there, if you were a barista, this might be what you put on your resume. You might say, well, I made coffee beverages, because that's what I did all day. I made lattes, I made cappuccinos, I poured coffee, I did whatever. But now start to remove all the industry specific language from that. What did you do instead? Well, you received orders, you prepared those orders according to recipes, you delivered them to the customers, and you also had to clean equipment. This is a step better. But still, this doesn't really apply to cybersecurity, does it? So let's take it one step further. Take all of the job-specific terminology out of it and raise it up another level. What does a barista do? Well, they process multiple inputs that come to them from different people. They translate those inputs into tasks. They determine how are they going to respond to them, and they prioritize those tasks for maximum efficiency so they can complete the work as quickly as possible. They focus on that efficient delivery to the customer, making it happen as quickly and with as much quality as they can. And amongst all that, they also have to plan and execute maintenance activities. This is exactly what I want a SOC analyst to be able to do. So what I've just done here is I've taken that skill set of a barista and I've expressed it in ways that apply to a cybersecurity position. This is what you need to do when you don't have the specific skill set that they're looking for. This is how you start to sell yourself. This is how you start to overcome these job descriptions that are so hyper-focused on experience with specific technologies and demonstrate, especially if you're entry level, yeah, here's how my work as a barista, as a grocery store clerk, as an accountant, as a gunner in the military, whatever it was that you have in your experience, look for those core transferable skills. That's what you see in the pink box on the far right here. Those are core transferable skills that could apply to any job out there, not just in security, not just in making coffee. It could be anywhere. use those to sell yourself. So it's about time for me to wrap up. I want to just leave you with this quote really quick from Ella Fitzgerald. Just don't give up. I know it's tough. And there are many of us, myself, Ty, others in the industry who are trying our best to change how the industry looks at that. But it's a slow ship to turn. And in the meantime, I want you all to be prepared to maximize your potential for finding that next role in security. So with that, I do invite you to continue the conversation. As I said at the beginning of this, I'd really like to share my ideas, have you challenge my ideas, etc. You've got my Twitter, my LinkedIn, and my website. And then finally, just a great big thank you to all of you and my employer for allowing me to be here today. So with that, I'm going to dive into a few of the questions that I see out there, because there's a couple out there, and I want to make sure I touch on these quickly. The first one I saw was related to GX certs. Are they worth it given the price? My response to that would be very simply, only if your employer is paying for them. The nice thing about GX certs is they do have a lot of education that's involved. The prep for a GX cert from SANS, for those of you that aren't aware what a GX cert is, there's a lot of preparation, there's a lot of training that goes into that. The problem is it's a $7,500 cost to get that certification between the test fees and the preparatory training. So for somebody trying to get into the space, there are alternatives out there. I would only go for a SANS training if I had a company that was going to pay for it. I'm just going to be blunt. So the second question I see is, let's see, it seems that everyone is writing CTF hack the box write-ups now. Are there different topics that feel like are desired more than just taking steps to break into a box? I would say anytime that you can demonstrate practical knowledge to somebody who's not a cybersecurity expert or enthusiast. So rather than, the diaries are good, things that are a little more unique, things that would apply practically to a role. Hack the Box is great, of course, if you're looking to get into pen testing. But what about delving deeper into maybe a key aspect of a particular vulnerability? So rather than saying, yeah, this is how I hacked into this box, take something like, cross-site scripting and go through all the different evasion techniques and try to explain those, or explain it to a developer how they go about resolving and remediating something like that. Instructional videos are always better than just diary videos, in my opinion. Diary videos are great. Demonstrating what you've done is great, but then take it to the next level and show that you can actually teach it, and that you can teach it in a way that's understandable. All right, so thanks for your answer. I guess the question I'm wondering about most is, what sort of blogs and articles could I write instead of Hack the Box CTF's write-ups? That's where I like anything that you're doing. If you have a home network, that is a great space. For me personally, I run a firewall, I have a programmable switch, things like that, and I run into issues. I create multiple VLANs, and how do I get routing to go through from one VLAN to the other through multiple interfaces on the firewall? How do I configure snort on my firewall to look for specific attack strings or patterns and things like that? Things that show that you had a real world problem and you applied your knowledge to create a solution, those will always have greater benefit. Look for organizations or friends that have websites or things that can give you permission to go out and pen test them if you're looking to get into penetration testing, and document what you did. Obviously make sure that they have a chance to fix it and remediate it, so you're not showing zero-day vulnerabilities in their website to the world, but document some of that. Show how you actually did it in a real world. It wasn't just a hack the box where you followed the same videos that somebody else did because they were using the same box and you're able to figure things out. Go out there into a practical real world environment and share that. What knowledge base or certification that you wish cybersecurity policy as opposed? So certification that you wish cybersecurity policy folks had. So for policy folks, it's interesting, right? Sorry, I had to read that question twice. I think one of the key factors here is there are certifications. I think the generalist certifications are better there. So CISA or the SSCP or even a Security Plus, having those is great. There are certifications in certain compliance requirements like PCI, GDPR, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Until you're really deep into one of those roles, I don't know if those are necessarily valuable, but just having more of that high level application of security concepts knowledge that you get from something like a CISA or a SSCP or something like that, those tend to be really valuable. All right, I'm not totally sure I understand this question, Will. How do you get around larger breaks in employment, 2+ years? As far as like your resume, if you do have a break, you just have a break. I mean, there's nothing you can do about it. It's not necessarily going to disqualify you. Just be aware that the fewer of those breaks that you have, the better. I mean, if you took 2 years off and you were unemployed for 2 years, or for whatever reason, there's that large break there. Yeah, there's not a lot you can do with that if you had no employment. I mean, that's just the way it is. But just try to minimize those, and wherever you can, make sure you fill in those blanks. One more question here. I have a bachelor's degree in mechatronic, and I have worked 4 years for a large multinational company as an electronic tech. Now I am currently studying a master's degree in cybersecurity. Is there any way to get experience while in school? Is my experience in electronic technology something that would help? So definitely your experience in electronics would be great, especially when we consider things like industrial control systems or Internet of technology, Internet of trash, as I call it, Internet of things, as other people call it. That's where you get it in a lot of times, things like firmware and how do you attack devices with, more purpose-built hardware and so forth. So your experience as an electronic tech might be helpful there. As far as getting other experience, again, a lot of the lab work and things that you can do on your own, experimenting with different technologies and documenting what you've done, trying to apply that to your own home network if you can. There are a lot of tools and things out there that are common to the industry that do offer free evaluations. So use those when you can as well. And then I see John Stoner weighed in here, the CASP, let me make that more clear how he said that, would work for policy folks too. Yeah, that's a really good one. John, thank you for mentioning that as well. That would be another good one for folks to look into. Whew. So I know I went through those fast because I know we're running out of time and we have run over, but hopefully I touched on the questions. I hope you guys found value from this. Again, please feel free to reach out anytime you've got questions. I'm always happy to lend an ear, see if I can connect you to a job or connect you with a mentor. But again, thank you for your time. I appreciate you folks attending, and we'll toss it back to Ty.
Sure thing. Alyssa, thank you so much for being here and giving this great presentation. We learned a lot. There's been some great feedback that I've been getting on social media and everything. So thank you, thank you, thank you. We'd love to have you anytime.
I appreciate it. Thanks so much.
All right. Well, have a good night, everyone, and we look forward to seeing you at our next meetup.